welcome back. Part 2 of the Melly Show, learning more about Shane. So we ended last time around talking generally about your career. So I figured we could kind of pick it back up now that I have a better timeline of the way things happened. And then you have a lot of stories of things that you recalled from the last time we spoke. So you can kind of touch on all those things that were the more impactful things of kind of how you got to where you are now today. So, first, obviously you were babysitting. We did talk about that. But what was it like babysitting, and why did Sue and Mike Paraskevich trust you with their kids?
I don't know. Actually, we met them, and I don't know. They just had a trust in me. Honestly, I mean, like I said, my house was the blight, and I remember riding my motorcycle up and down the road, and I would stop and talk to him, and it took Mike forever to let me put Joshua, the oldest, on the front of the motorcycle and putch around like I've done. You see me do for ages. But when he finally trusted me, I kind of would ride the kids around and stop and say hi and this and that, just being me. And I think that they had gotten the idea from that because the kids love me. And now that I think about it, babysitting was a ball because, I just kept them entertained. It was really easy, and they were all boy too. Like the kids were fun. I mean, I'd put them in the baskets and pull them around the house, and because I was a kid too, so we just played, kept them out of trouble, fed them, and Mike and Sue were great. They paid me well, and they needed me. I mean, they worked a lot. There was the part of their life where they were both working really, really hard. So, it was probably even a financial strain to pay me, but it was great. So it was a lot of fun and watch them grow up. And even when I stopped babysitting them, I'd come over and ride mini bikes with them and do some stuff. So we were really close.
How many kids did they have?
2.
And how old were they?
When I first started babysitting, they were both in diapers actually. So I think what, 3-ish and 1.5-ish or 2 or maybe a little bit older, something like that.
Oh, wow. And how old were you when you started babysitting?
I had to be 13, 12 or 13.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And they're still a part of your life, right?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Josh had passed away at a
Oh.
young age. Great, great guy. He was a kind of a melancholy type personality. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's super unfortunate. But he was a great guy, and then I haven't seen his brother much. I know when they moved away, we didn't really. I see Mike and Sue more than Kyle, but yeah.
And then after or during babysitting, you also did hay at the farm.
Um, as I started working on the farm, I pretty much like the first summer was light, where I kind of met Kevin and we did a little bit, and then the next summer,
Wait, which Kevin did you meet?
Brown.
Okay. You met him doing hay?
I met him at the farm. That's the first time I met him. This is a great story.
So
the first day I show up at the farm, and I was, again, being an only child and all the kind of way that people perceive me, I was not very social, right? So I just showed up. I was there. Hey, this is Kevin, whatever. Well, here, come with me. We go out in the field, and he had just been on fire, literally on fire, just before I got there. So there's a motorcycle. So he said, jump on the tractor, jumped on the tractor, drove out with the loader, drove out to the back of the field, and there was a motorcycle with a melted carburetor and gas tank, and it was on fire. So when he was driving, somehow he got fire in his leg. It lit him on fire. He jumped off, and it sat there and burned. Walked back to the barn. I showed up, and we went and picked the motorcycle up, drove it to the dumpster, dumped it in the dumpster. That was the first time I met Kevin Brown.
Well, what were you guys doing there? Was he just riding, or did he know people?
My
at the
dad took me
farm?
there because the guy that owned the farm was Tommy Lenhard, and his father and my father were like best friends. And Tommy told me endless stories about how when his dad was busy, my dad took him fishing and took him places. My dad was like a second dad.
So there's multiple Tommies. So like
Big Tom, Tommy 2, Tommy 3.
Big Tom owned the farm, right?
No, Big Tom, did not. Tommy 2
Tommy
did.
2.
Yeah,
Okay.
Big Tom worked at the racetrack.
Okay. And then Tommy 2 would go fishing with your dad.
Right. So like Tommy 2 will actually speaks very dearly about the time he spent with my father.
I'm sure he spent a lot more, more years.
Yeah,
more years with him, right?
At the time, Tom's dad, Big Tom, wasn't doing a lot of parenting the way he should have, and so Tommy has a lot of, like I said, my dad was the father figure in that time frame, so it's pretty cool.
Wow.
My dad was like I said, despite his problems, my dad was super kind, great with kids.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of parallels to like you could probably the way I will interact with kids and take interest and try to get them to do things, and our nieces and nephews and your cousins and all that stuff. As my dad was that guy. If he was still around, he would have had a lot of fun with them.
I wish I would have got to meet him.
He would have really enjoyed that.
So T2 owned the farm, and why was Kevin Brown there?
So, how did Tommy? So Kevin's father was a teamster and was like a union steward or something like that with Big Tom.
What's a teamster?
It's a union, and there's like people that are in charge of the union that like advocate for and I don't know a lot about it. I'm not a big union guy, but they advocate for the laborers and stuff like that. So and he also worked for Detroit Allison Diesel. So Big Tom and Kevin's father knew each other. And then his mom did the accounting and worked at the farm and helped with the finances and stuff like that. That's how they all tied in. And
So
my dad brought me there to work there to get a job with Tommy.
Oh, gosh. And is that when you started working on
Yes.
the farm? Why did he want you to work there?
It just, I think to a certain extent, my dad had to get me somewhere. I was getting older and he was working a lot at the time. My mom was nuts. So I think he just, and again, we didn't have phones. We didn't, it's not like today. There was no Uber. So he could take me there and I'd spend the night a lot of nights there. I'd spend the night at Tommy because Tommy was like family. So if my dad couldn't get me or if I was there working for a few days, it was kind of like if I was useful. At first it was if he's useful, pay him. If not, whatever, he could just hang out. And I became useful. I think I became, besides Kevin, I was like a right hand of Tommy, especially during hay season. Tommy and I spent, like I said, 100 hours together. Actually, he would leave me out in the field. But Kevin was his right man running the rental system. And I think when it came to the labor and the hay field, I was his right man everywhere else, right-hand man.
What was it like working on the farm?
It was interesting because we worked 7 days a week, despite hay season. Like, we always had to take care of the horses. We were always up early. It was brutally hot in the summer. It was super cold, especially out in the field. So it's interesting that today's kids would find the environment insane. Like the parents would not let them work. We were fine. We went out there, bundled up, got our stuff worked. There was a little bit, even though we worked all the time, there was a level of autonomy that we had, I think, that made an interesting job because it was like do the chores, but like your mom would come hang out with me while I was doing chores. So it's not like you didn't have some freedom. It was very interesting, and if you became reliable and you knew what you were doing, like Kevin and I, we kind of steered things and were not in charge of things, but kind of could do what you want as long as your work got done. So it's a very interesting job. It was a very brutal job, but there was a level of freedom that we had. So I don't know. But we just lived there. Like the only place we could go and shop was the 8 Mile Myers in Northville because it was the only place open.
I can't even imagine that.
Only place open 24 hours. And there was a couple, like the truck stop. Used to be a truck stop at Wixom there that was 24 hours for food. Of course, so we were done. If we got done early enough, we'd get either ourselves or generally like Lisa, my girlfriend, and whoever Kevin at the time was hanging out with, and we'd go take them to a movie and a dinner every single night. And we made so much money relatively that we would just take turn paying.
Yeah.
Didn't matter where we ate. If it was a steakhouse, didn't matter what was going on. I would pay one night, Kevin would pay the other night. We had tons of money. The year that I was doing 100 hours out in the field, I bought a truck from Tommy, made payments to him, and still had like almost $4,000 in the bank by the time school started again from working on the farm. Because you couldn't spend it. Like even going out at night, where are you going to spend it?
Well, what kind of things did you
and
do
we had
on
cash.
The farm?
We literally had cash. Like we looked like we were drug dealers. We had so much money in our pockets.
Well, what kind of things did you do at the farm?
Well, first thing is the staple is you got to feed the horses, let the horses out, rake everything up, clean it up, muck the stalls, which eventually him and I didn't do a lot of because we were with Tommy doing other things. But, if somebody wasn't there to do it, we were doing it. They need to get the horses ready for rental. The rental horse was a big deal. He had like 200 or 250 head of horse there in Novi. Like right now it's all subdivisions.
For racing, right?
No. These were all, he did have racehorses, but they were very far and few between. It was all rental horses for people to come and rent.
Oh, wow.
you know, and then everybody that showed up there thought you were a cowboy.
I had no idea that you took care of horses. I thought all you ever did at the farm was odd jobs and hay.
No, I rode horses that's why I never liked riding them. I kind of could now, but I hated riding horses because I literally rode kind of junk horses. They were rental horses. They weren't the nice ones like you have, right? So they were horses you had to like force to go out in the field. And I rode every single day. Like I was out there for a certain period, at least. I was the guy that would take the group out, take the group. That was like an entry level position, you know? So we rode every single day. And I only fell off twice. I got kicked off by a horse named Sandbar. So it kicked me off, and I was on another horse, and it got me in the leg, and I tipped over. And then your mother and I, she had this pony called Koa, big fat pony, and she never had a saddle on it. And I hated riding bareback because I didn't have the ability to ride like she was a much better horse person than I was, right? And I was somehow driving. I always called it driving, not riding, just to annoy her. And we're galloping across a field, and she was bitching about me about, you know, something I was doing wrong. And I said, "What, do you want to drive?" And when I leaned, we frickin' in a dead run hit the ground. I hit the ground. She fell right on top of me. And then my foot caught the reins, and the horse whipped around and was facing at us. And I'm looking up at Koa, and she's just, you know, blowing into my face, just out of breath. And your mom is, you know, motherfucking me for away because that's a true story. But she was fine because she fell 100% on top of me.
Well,
I was out of breath.
Like
I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe, but I was like, you know, and she's laughing at me, you know, you deserve it, you know. So that's the only 2 times I remember. Then one time they got me a mule, and they named it Shane.
Oh, gosh.
They gave Shane a
That's
mule,
fitting.
a little mule. This mule could like jump in the back of a pickup truck. It was just, like they do that. They take them and put them in pickup trucks and drive them around. They don't put them in trailers. And this little mule was like bred. It was a small one. It was bred to just climb anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cool, except they don't have shoulders, so even the saddles don't really stay on a mule. I don't know if you know that, but they don't really have shoulders, so it's really hard to keep a saddle on them. And I wasn't that great at, you know, again, I wasn't the greatest horseman. I was a functional rider.
I wish I could have seen you riding horses way back in the day. I feel like I would get a real big kick out of that. We do have one
I was
video
ridiculous.
Well, how do you figure?
I wasn't, you know.
The chicken arms.
You do have a video. Was that
I do
video
have a
when you
video,
thought I couldn't
yeah.
ride? And you were all worried I was going to fall
Okay,
down.
well, to be fair, you took my horse that overran barrels. She basically just chased barrels her whole life. I hadn't even loped her yet, and you ran her across the yard. This horse would not walk in a straight line. It took me 6 months to bring her back down to like an actual functional horse.
But that's my speed.
No,
Yes.
clearly it's not. You were like, so funny.
Did I not ride it just fine? Come on, be honest.
No, it was awful. Actually, you had
What do you mean it
zero
was awful?
control.
I
You're
didn't
just
fall.
lucky
I
that
had
she
all
didn't
the
want to
control.
leave the farm. You were all like,
All right, we're putting
yeah.
the video into this podcast.
All the horse people will chime in and be like, "Yeah, don't know what you're
It
doing."
might have been, but I had
Also, to
control
be
of the
fair,
horse.
if you fell off that horse, you probably would have like broken a hip.
I already have broken hips.
I know you would have broken another hip. I was not happy with you.
I know.
That was something that was ridiculous.
You got to trust me. I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, but anyways, so after that, tell me about. Well, actually, no. You mentioned something about finding a dead guy. Was that when you were working at the farm?
So, yeah, we used to go. There was a horse auction that Tommy's father, stepdad, his mom and stepdad owned. It was called Fenton. I think it was just called Fenton Horse Auction. And so every Saturday we would go out there and help him because he had to deal with the tack and the horses. So it was part of our job. We actually got paid to go to the auction. It was also fun because there were people there and it was a social thing too. We're driving down 23 north and there's an SUV there. Just looks like it's parked there, kind of a little beat up. And as it goes by, I'm like, I think that was an accident. Kevin's like, what are you talking about? It's like, slow, stop. I go, I think there was a hurt guy or a dead guy in that truck. And he's like, no way. He stops. This is back when there was crazy traffic on 23. Right now, 23 is just nonstop traffic. This is a long time ago. So he stops right in the middle of the 23 and reverses 500 yards. And sure enough, there's a hand hanging out of the door, right? And so when you see, there's 2 times that things were surreal. I saw a guy get shot in the face with a shotgun. And my brain didn't process he was actually shot in the face with a shotgun. It's a whole other story.
Since when?
I never told you that story. We'll tell you
No.
that next. So, and this time when it was like, he looked dead, but your brain doesn't want to believe that he's dead, right? So I'm going, this fucking guy is dead. Kevin's like, no way. So now I'm walking up to the truck. Still, nobody's driving by. We're in the dark, right? And so I go over, pick up his hand, put it. I think it's a joke. Like my brain is thinking this guy's going to jump out at me. Sure enough, no, he's dead. He's just deader than a doornail. And the way he came to a conclusion, it just looked like he was parked on the road. So I start looking, and I see in the median, there's like shoes and clothing in the median. So he was coming the other way. Don't know how, he probably fell asleep or was drunk, or I don't know. I did smell some alcohol in there. And I think he rolled and rolled and rolled, came across the side and came to a stop facing that way. That's all we could figure, right?
Did the car look all banged up?
It did look like it had rolled once we were up on it. But the way it was just positioned, it looked perfectly positioned. So we call, I don't know how we called, because I don't know if we had a cell phone back then or not. I doubt we had a cell phone back then. But somehow we got a hold of 911 or whatever. And it was kind of funny, though, because I guess the fire station was up a little bit across the fence. These guys in full fire gear, like flipping over the fence and running to the scene while the trucks were coming up the expressway. So long story short, we all got blocked in by the trucks. Now we're like, okay, the fun is over or whatever. Not fun, but the event is over. We're over it. We need to go to work because we don't have any way to tell Tommy we're not, we're stuck. So we're telling the cops, we got to go. Well, no, we this and that. And we're like, listen, you need to let us go. Like we literally told the cop, either put us in the cop car or get these guys out of our way. And we were kind of got in an argument with the cops, and they finally moved all the stuff and let us drive, took our numbers and stuff like that. And we went and left it. I don't know what happened after that, but it was crazy.
Oh, wow. That wasn't normal, though.
No, I mean, who sees a dead guy? I mean,
I don't know.
Now the guy that got shot in the face didn't die. I just couldn't believe he got shot in the face.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
So you remember Capone, the dog that you didn't really remember, but I had a really nice hunting dog. He used to hunt with Pete Cristiano. So we were invited to this really nice ranch to do what's called a European shoot, where they put a few pheasants in all the fields. You go hunt a little bit. Then they do a tower shoot, which is too hard to explain, but people that hunt know what a tower shoot is, where you rotate stations. So anyways, Pete says, listen, these guys only have one dog. Go help them clean up this field before we start hunting. So and I was young. Pete took me everywhere. I was like, he was like my dad taking Tommy out. Pete used to take me everywhere. And says, okay, great. So, and he knew I had a good dog. So we start hunting. Well, first of all, we pull in the field. This is just a side story. They're in this big Suburban. I had a lab. He had a lab. This other guy had a lab. And there was like 4 or 5 guys. So as soon as they see a pheasant right parked there, how you see a pheasant when you're on the field. So he opens the door. We all jump out. All our dogs get out. The guy shoots like 3 times, 4 times, or at this pheasant, and nobody notices this guy's lab jumps in the truck, and they were so big you could actually climb under the dashboard, like where the heater is at. Those old Suburbans. The dog's scared shitless. I'm the only guy that notices. Like the guy that owns the dog doesn't notice, and I'm like, "You ever take this dog hunting before?" Well, no, not really. So you thought it was a good idea to have 2 guys unload their guns over your dog for the first time without even knowing what the hell is going on? Well, so that sets the scene. So now I'm actually helping this guy kind of get this dog back in the action. Meanwhile, my dog's out running and putting birds up for the guys. So we come to a spot where a bird got clipped and it goes downhill, and it was down in this little thing. So he's like, hold on, I want to take my dog down there to flush it. So I'm looking and I'm doing the math. And I'm thinking about none of these guys know what they're doing. I'm like 16, 17 years old, and these guys are all way older than me. And I'm like, none of these motherfuckers know what they're doing. Like, this is scary. So I was like, you know what? I healed my dog, and I went down the hill because I just knew, just something told me that somebody would be shooting uphill, right? Like, you think you're shooting the bird, but you're shooting right where people are standing. So I was like, I'm going to be over there. So I healed my dog and went out. I just got out of the scene. And Pete told me, he goes, be careful. I don't know these guys. So he actually told me that. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, does not feel right. So when I'm watching, he flushes the bird. Bird goes up. He shoots at it, kind of misses. His father's best friend, this old dude, he's like 75, 80 years old, shoots downhill. Like, it's one thing to accidentally shoot uphill because you don't see the hill. That's a legitimate mistake. You don't shoot downwards, ever, right? Shoots this younger guy is maybe 25, shoots him right in the face. And he drops. So I'm like, huh. And my brain is like, and then I quickly come, I'm like, yeah, he just got shot in the face. He had these Coke bottle glasses, right? Just peppered. Didn't hit his eyeballs. But I went down there, and the guy that shot him never said a word, stood there with his mouth open like a retard, watching. And I'm popping out BBs where I can, but they wrapped around his jaw. They were here. The one that hurt him the most was right here. I actually once I took the one out of here, he relaxed. He was screaming because there's a nerve. So I'm young guy picking him out. Nobody's doing anything. They're all older than me, doing shit, right? So I kind of get him stabilized and figure it out. And finally, the guy that shot him goes, "What happened?" And of course, I looked at him. I said, "You shot him in the face, you dumb son of a bitch. What do you think happened? I mean, how do you not know what happened?" I was starting to get frustrated with him, you know? So the funny end of the story is the guy goes to the hospital. They're lead. They don't fish lead out of your body. They only fish out steel. Lead gets encapsulated and stays. So he brings the x-ray where there's lead wrapped around his jaw, stuck, that's never coming out. He had bled everywhere in his face. They pulled out what they could pull out. He showed up for the steak dinner. We all went and did our shoot. He shows up for the steak dinner. Swear to God, you cannot make it up. Then the guy, you have insurance for this shit, right? If I accidentally shoot somebody in the face and I have insurance that's going to pay his medical bills, I'm paying. Yep. Like, make the claim. The guy refused the claim. His dad's best friend literally fought the claim, and I guess his medical bills didn't get paid, which is a side story. So it's just people are interested. But anyway, that's just a long, weird sidetrack story of hunting.
Couple insane things that you saw.
Yeah.
Like, I can't honestly say I've ever seen a dead person.
Thank God.
And I don't ever want to see one.
It's surreal.
Yeah. So the next thing you did was you worked for Murray Car Audio.
Murray's Car Audio, Brian Murray, one of the greatest people I've ever met, and taught me a ton about sales. So I walk in, I was just going down Grand River, asking for jobs. He goes, "What's your name?" Told my name is Shane. He goes, at the time it was a unique name. He goes, "That's a pretty unique name." He goes, "You're hired." I said, "Really? Just like that?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I only hire people with unique names." And he points at another guy, this kid with the mop hair, little skinny dude. He goes, his name's Monaco. So it was Monaco and Shane. So, okay. And I loved electronics, but I didn't really I was just getting ready to go to not Lawrence Tech, ITT Tech at the time. I was just getting ready to do that. And so I went full time, 60 hours I worked there, and 20 real school hours I went to ITT Tech. And that was in Troy. So again, I was just work, then school, work, then school. And it was great. I learned a lot about sales, selling intangibles, because we were the first ones to do those boom boxes and make the cars, with the big bass in it and make them hop and make it all custom and do the dashboards. I don't really see that much anymore. But at the time, it was popular in California, and it was the Michigan version of that. And not many people were doing it. So then we were selling systems back then for $10, $20, $30, $40,000. And this is 35 years ago, so it was very interesting. So I learned a lot, but I learned a lot about selling an intangible, telling them what it was going to sound like, telling them what they were going to, what they're going to do, making the sale without having anything finished to show them. So and he was a very good business guy too, very smart. He also taught me the customer's not always right.
Explain that.
He just customers not always right. That the concept. Like even I tell customers, no, I'm not Walmart. You're not going to walk in here and just say because I said so, I'm giving you the money back, or you're not happy, or whatever. That's what they're trained to do. Customer's always right. Just make them happy. No complaints. No, especially when you're doing custom things. You talk to the customer. You come to the conclusion that you have something that they want. They come to the conclusion that you can do it and deliver it. Then you outline a path to do it. Here's what I need from you. Here's what you need from me. I even, I got to the point I could say, here's the challenges we're going to have where you're going to be frustrated. And when you're frustrated, you have to call me so we can get you through these things, right? But if we make a deal and make an agreement and lay out a path and suddenly it's all thrown out the window, you got to be able to say, no, we talked about this. We said this was going to happen. I did what I said. Well, this timeline changed. Yeah, and I explained to you that if you change what you asked for, there's going to be a time penalty. So everything is consistent with what we talked about, right? So customers aren't always right. I'm not saying you disregard the customer. I'm saying that the customer has a job too. The customer has to have their part when you're doing custom things. I've been developing websites for years. It's like building a house. It's a custom thing. It's not a cookie cutter thing. So he just, taught me that you need to make sure that the customers are qualified and talked to and lot of sales books I've read that also reiterate those things. There's ways to mentally mark with the customer so that when these things happen, that you can bring back that mark and say, we talked about this. So this is what we talked about. It doesn't always work. I mean, some people are just unreasonable or just want to leverage things against you. But in general, it makes a happier customer and a better project.
So is it the fact that you're pointing out that they're wrong, or the fact that you lay good expectations as to how a job is to be completed?
I think expectation management is one of the greatest skills on the planet. And I have told you that before. Whether it be relationships, whether it be sales, whether it be anything at all, managing expectations is one of the greatest skills you can have, and it's along with sales. So yeah, expectation management is where it's at.
Yeah, I think sometimes hearing that the customer isn't always right is like pretty shocking, but it makes sense once you actually explain
Right.
that. Like, what does that really mean? And you're right, you're not Walmart.
Well, and you've picked up the theme. Like, you're doing a good job of, I'm at a point in my life that I just necessarily don't clean up what I say, and I say it in a harsh way. And even in the last podcast, I like how you're like, but here's why he's saying it. You're doing it in a nice way by to kind of, elaborating on my point. But yeah, a lot of the things that I say in a very terse manner do have a significant reason behind it.
When you first started your businesses, did you have a lot of trouble with customers coming back and saying, hey, I thought it was supposed to be a type of way, or this isn't the way I expected it to happen?
Yes, actually, one of the biggest things I learned early on, say we have a scope of work. Here's what you get. Here's what you want. We define it. We lay it out. Customers get so excited as they see the progress. They're like, oh, well, can we do this and this? And my first mode of operation was like, sure, be this much more. Great. So I would do that. And then what would happen is, of course, the timeline would increase. It's more work. And they're like, wait a second, you said it would take 90 days. Yeah, but you added 50% more work. But that was kind of my fault. I figured that out. I didn't explain that. So here's what I did. And I did this for years. And, remember, at time, your mother was coding, right? I actually got to the point where I taught her how to code. I would sell. And while she was finishing a project, I'd be getting new customers. And I had people book 6 months ahead with deposits. And I was making them give like 70% down on projects that could be $50,000 back in the day. It was savage, right? It took a lot of sales skill to do that, but I also had to make sure they went well, right? So what I would do is I'd finally say, okay, here's the scope of work. Here's what we're doing. Here's the timeline, all right? And here's what to expect, all the things that I said. You're going to want things. You're going to have ideas and things you're going to change while we do the project. We're going to have a B list. And we can do list B the second we're done with the first list, the first project, the first scope. So every time they'd bring something new, I'd be like, perfect, I've got that. I put that on list B, right? And then we'd have a price point, this and that. That way there, I was able to complete the project, right? And then we had another $5,000, $10,000 worth of work right there queued up, and they're happy, right? I tell them, I want to make you happy first. I need to prove to you that we can hit this mark and make you happy. I go, if we keep changing the scope, you're going to be frustrated because you can't generate money with it. So that was one of the big things in that specific thing of website development. Of course, as I matured and had more things and was doing things on the fly, my brain would start setting expectations on things very quickly. So now I kind of, on the fly, am very effective at selling because of that.
What is one of the best lessons that you learned at Murray Car Audio, aside from the customer isn't always right? And what exactly did you do there?
We just installed car systems. We'd come in, sell them on an audio system. We had this big display, pick the speakers, pick the radio, pick the amplifier, maybe custom build the box, whatever it was. And then we would sell it. So we all had to sell. And he would tell us, your turn, go out there and sell. He was really good at making sure we all did it. And
were you good at it right away?
Yeah. I don't know why. But again, he was a really good mentor. I'm telling you, I can't tell you enough about how Brian handled it. It was you've met him. He's an interesting guy. And he seems kind of goofy, but man, this guy's all business. He's brilliant how he handles people. And then we also had to install it. So.
And what other things did you learn working there? And how long was it?
I can't remember how many years. It was at least a couple of years.
Couple years.
At least a couple of years.
And that was your first sales job?
Yeah.
So what else did you learn, if anything?
Electrically, I was solid. Like taking what he said and wiring, I was so great at reading up and doing electronics. I just loved electronics so much. I had more electronic skill than even his other guy. He
Is
was
that because of working there, or did you
no,
do it
the
prior?
fundamental electronics and electrical and hooking things up and reading schematics and doing those things, super easy for me. Learning how to retrofit in the dashboard they taught me, but hooking things up and understanding electronics, I was already there.
Why?
Because I literally studied. Remember, I told you the story about the circuit boards, Radio Shack. I'd read books. They used to have these little books about electronics and circuits, and they were like, the way they weren't even typed out, they were handwritten by like an engineer, and they would talk about circuits and how transistors work and things. I'd gone through that hundreds of times to understand what they call discrete electronics. Now there's microprocessors. Pretty much everything you can do now is almost in a package, and 90% of the discrete electronic wiring you'd have to do or design you have to do is already built in the chip. So it's completely different now than it was back then.
I don't even understand how.
I'll give you a quick example. If you do have a chip or a device, you'd have to put maybe a resistor there to protect something, to protect it from someone, too much current or something. These days, that protection is built in the chip. So you pretty much just connect everything with very few additional components and you program them versus having to build a whole front end before it hits the circuit. Then on the output, it's just less components, more programming. And they have more chips or boxes that do everything at once.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you were at school, did ITT?
Mm-hmm.
What were you going to school for?
Digital electronics.
Is that what led you?
It was a specific for digital electronics college.
Because of the job you were working at?
No, I always want to do. I watched how hard my dad worked, and I knew how to do that stuff. I knew how to plumb, I knew how to do, but he worked really, really hard, and I wanted a clean job. I wanted a job that was, and the idea of making a device, like designing from scratch with those components. Somehow I got enamored with when I'd open stuff up and I'd look at see all the components. I'm like, who figures out how to connect these things together to do literally anything? It's the precursor to like the concept of a computer. You can program, any kind of software. I mean, there were fundamental basic computers and stuff and Commodores and Ataris back then, but then everything else was big mainframes. It really wasn't now where you just get a laptop.
Right.
At that point,
And how long did you go to school for that?
I went through out of 4 years to ITT.
Why didn't you finish?
It's a good question. It was mostly money. My dad was getting sick, and he figured out how to finance the first couple years. And then my uncle Eddie, he did pay for one semester of school. I also went to Lawrence Tech, so he paid a semester for Lawrence. But to be completely honest, and I know he would have paid for it, and he didn't do that for many people. He actually, but I just didn't want to take his money. I felt weird, so I just quit taking his money.
But that ITT, that would have been like a 4-year degree.
Yes.
And Lawrence Tech, was that in addition to ITT, or is?
Yeah, because it was hard to drive all the way to Troy. Lawrence was close; it was in Southfield, so I figured it would, with the workload, it would be. I couldn't physically do the new work I was doing and make it to ITT because I was starting with ICI or whatever. It was easier to go to the other one. So I went to ITT, Lawrence Tech. I took all sorts of other college courses. I've got a lot of education. I just never got the degrees.
Why didn't you ever go back and just finish the last year?
Didn't need it. I figured out I could be very successful without it. And frankly, I have engineered electronic circuits and had them installed and sold to big companies and with the knowledge I had. So I was very, me, I'm end result oriented. I'm not hung up on concepts. I'm like, either get the shit done or you can't. You're either capable or you're not. And I made sure I was capable. And if not, I purchased labor from the right person that was capable. Like one of the circuits I did, I could have laid out the board, but I knew how. But I was like, you know what? I hired the guy to lay out the board. I gave him the specs and circuits and stuff. But I, learned to delegate and do it efficiently because at that point it was about making money for your mother and I.
Do you ever wish that you went back to college?
Not once, especially now with all the woke bullshit happening in college. Not that I would have been indoctrinated, but I just can't believe what they've turned those things into.
Did you ever run into something like over the next few years where like if you had a degree you would have gotten somewhere that maybe
Never.
You didn't?
Never.
That's interesting.
And I helped Eric get work at IBM without a degree. Same concept. Eric was very driven.
Mm-hmm.
Eric was very smart, and I taught him how to interview. I told one company one time at ICI when I was getting bumped up to that sales position. I'm like, you know what? You can keep my checks in your desk until you think I deserve them. I go, if you don't think I deserve it, keep it. But I will do it. But I was very, I did what I said I would do. I mean, that's hard. Not many people do that. But I mean, if I committed, I would make sure I got the job done. That's just how I was made.
And that was your next job, ICI.
Yep.
And so obviously we talked quite a bit about that. How did you originally get the job? Is that
Mike
how?
Paris or Sue Paraskevich worked there.
Okay.
And it was really simple. All we were doing was online editing technical documents, proofreading them. That was my first job for 19,500 hours a year. Then somehow, I can't remember how I got it, but I always wanted to work in the main building with electronics. And somehow, I think Sue probably seeded their minds that that's what I wanted to do. I interviewed for a spot and became just a tech, right? And once they talked to me and realized I knew I could do this stuff, again, no degrees yet, but I was going to school. They were like, cool, and
Did they ask for degrees?
Yeah, I think technically it was a degree job, but they liked me. Again, I could interview. I could interview really well. I was just like, if I don't do the job, fire me. Like I was really clear because a lot of people are shy on, the big corporate environment. You can't fire an HR. I'm like, fire me. I don't care. I'll put it in writing. So if I don't do what I say, kick me out.
That's how it should be.
It is how it should be. The world would be very different.
And how long did you work there until eventually you just left and you started your own thing after that?
Probably, I got to say for you, see, this is where the reason it gets foggy is this is when my dad was really sick and he was dying. And he died when I was working there.
Oh.
So.
Well, if you were going to college, it was probably a year or two.
Yeah. Yeah. So I became the head tech there. They even sent me to Korea. Did I tell you the story about how they treated me in Korea?
Yeah. You mentioned it.
On the last.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like.
I think you might have touched on it.
So I looked like I was 12, right? I mean, I was very thin, small, young looking. And they had this device that, to make a long story short, imagine any engine, rip off the injectors and electronics, and just plug in on this one device, generic like spark and injectors, and you could configure it to run any engine. So it would become the computer for the car to run the engine. And they would test engines, like competitive testing, test their own, maybe do it when they're coming off the assembly line, whatever they want to do. But it was at the time a unique unit. It was about $50,000 each, right? Nowadays, it'd be like $150,000, $200,000 box, right? And Daewoo was using them in Korea. And something happened, and the plant was basically down, completely down. They were not producing cars, or engines anyways. It was an engine plant. So they sent me. And when they showed up at the airport and saw in the middle of the night, it was me they sent and not some older engineer, they got pissed and left me, went back, called America, and said, get this kid out of here. We wanted an engineer, not this kid. They would not talk English to me. They would not pick me up. They sent a short bus to pick me up. So I go there and work. I didn't sleep the whole flight, so I was up for like 36 hours. I got the plant partially up, and as soon as I got the plant partially up, suddenly they spoke English. Suddenly they took me to dinner. Suddenly they fed me lunch. They didn't feed me lunch the first day. Like I didn't even know how to. I like stumbled in their lunch area and like figured out how to get some food. Like they did not treat me well. I was gold once the plant was up. And I didn't see any daylight. I literally bought your mom a gift at night from a vendor with one of those, looked like a bunch of roll-up storage units. That's how they sell on the street there. And I found some place and I bought this little, they have this little layout day beds that you have. And I don't even know how I got it on the plane home. It was not easy. But I just want to make sure I bought her something to take home, right? And so that was my trip to Korea. But when I tell people I was to Korea, because I'm in a Taekwondo, they go, oh, you got to go to Korea, not for Taekwondo. And I was not in a tourism area. Can't remember where I went, but it was where the industrial area was.
And why were you sent to go fix the plant?
Because the one guy, Phil Gaubus, for some reason couldn't do it. He actually didn't do field work anymore. He was the guy that invented it. Another guy was a little bit older, and for health reasons, he didn't want to take the trip. So they're like, Shane can do it. So it's kind of fortuitous.
Is that something you did for them, like fix plants?
Well, I would go to the Chrysler plant. Around here, I would do it all the time. But I didn't go to Korea and do it, So yeah, I was sent to plants all the time and to fix stuff locally here, mostly in Michigan.
And then after ICI, you left there and then bought a lawnmower and started mowing lawns.
Well, that's when I went from there. When my dad died, partially me, partially the position, partially it kind of my position faded out there, um, and they made me the technical salesperson. We already told that story, right? And then I quit that when the guy was giving me a hard time, wouldn't let me sell. I could either kept taking their money, but I was like, screw this. And before I quit, Eric had broken his back. He was recovering. We figured generate some revenue, so I bought a lawnmower, one of those zero turns. It was called a Grasshopper, real big one, and just enough to fit in the back of a pickup truck though, and Eric's truck. So what we did is I bought that first thing I've ever financed in my life was that mower, first credit.
How much did you buy it for?
I don't remember. I think it was about $9,000 or something like that. And I financed it. It was through AgriCredit. I'll never forget. It was a great interest rate because it was an agricultural loan. Somehow he got me. Never forget that. And then we were in the mowing business. And so on the weekend, we just did on the weekends at first.
Yeah.
Or actually almost all the time on the weekends.
While you were working at ICI?
While I was working at ICI, I would do it the weekends with Eric. He did a lot of it. He would drive it, and he could even weed whip and run it with one hand. He was something. And then I decided to quit, and him and I together. Actually, Eric was the only guy that worked for me when I started a computer company called Computer Upgrades.
And what did you do? Just upgrade computers, or did you
just build and upgrade computers? So I remember sitting in my living room, putting a case down. Back then, you have to build them all custom, right? So I remember putting a case down, taking out the motherboard. You had to build all these dip switches. I remember just telling Eric from point zero how to build a computer, and he did it. And then we sold. This is another story. I sold $350,000 the first year, but I had to close the business because I did not know how to collect money. Nobody would pay me. I had no concept of how to get paid. People are scared to ask for money. That's where I learned how to ask for money. Right. So I ended up going out of business owing $80,000 to one vendor. Remember Pat Barry, the guy that worked for me for a while later at the shop? Well, he was like their star sales guy there. And I remember coming in there and going, I had to close the business. I know I owe you guys like $80,000. I paid every vendor. American Express called me and offered a buyout. And that's the only person I took the buyout on. And it didn't hurt my credit. And I was like, well, if you're going to offer $1,500 on $15,000, screw it. So I took it. But everybody else, I made sure I paid them. I've never not paid a bill in my life. I've never had anything default. So I went there. I said, okay, I'll pay you. Here's what we'll do. So I took the few customers where the phone still rang. I had till 10 o'clock in the morning, I take calls. And I said, okay, I'll come look at it, but here's the deal. I'll get you great pricing on parts, but you have to pay when I install them because it's 1 day net credit. The reason you're getting good pricing is no credit terms. I said, and then you got to pay me to install it $60 an hour. Back then, that was actually pretty good money. This was again like 30 years ago or whatever, right? Or so I would show up to these places, and they used to say, "Well, I don't have a check, so and so is not here," and I used to always accept that, right? So I troubleshoot it. You need RAM. Say RAM was like $50 a stick at the time for 1 meg. Okay, I'd call Pat Barry. Hey Pat, I need 4 megs of RAM. He'd be like, that'll be 200. $200. I tell him $250. That's your discounted rate. Okay, great. Because it was still cheaper than if they bought it somewhere. It was still a good deal. And then I'd say, okay. So I'd come back the next day. I'd charge them the $60 to install it. So it'd be $250 plus my $60, right? Oh, Jack's not here to write you a check. Jack said he was going to be able to write me a check because we made a deal. That's why he got this deal. Oh, here's a check. While you're at it, write one for me. So they'd write the check to, I think it was called Interactive at the time. So write check to Interactive, right? And then they would write a check to Computer Upgrade. So I said, while you're at it, write me my check. Now that we figured out you could write a fucking check, right? Because that scam was not working. And then what he did was, he was nice. The guy that owned the place was nice. He gave me half of it back. So half went against my debt. And I made more than 50. Like a lot of it was a lot more money. It was very expensive back then, right? So the parts. So not only did I get out of debt, me and your mother took this from me being in debt for over $80,000. We had like $60,000 in the bank and was killing it in like 8 months. Because what I do is I'd book till 4 o'clock, my appointment. So I'd take calls till 10, make my deals. I'd work till 4. And then at 4, I had a cell phone at the time, big brick. And then I would take calls on demand. And I would just sell everything I could at the end of the day. So I was working, and your mom would do I would do the accounting, but your mom would do, like, I had some accounting jobs that would have her do software on and things like that. But she would help me like manage the books. And so we just worked together. She'd take calls. She'd go with me. Maybe she'd drive Eric somewhere, right? So it was awesome, So we were just killing. I made so much money when I learned how to collect money. And
Crazy how that works.
yeah, and then that turned into software. That's how we turned to Magna Software. Is I started figuring out, because your mom ended up writing a whole point of sale system back when point of sale systems were not really common. She wrote a whole system that we sold to grocery stores, but it was a nightmare to support. I couldn't keep 10 customers happy with 10 employees. It was just always, and it was so new, right? So when I started working with web software and realized there was one server in one room that went out to the customers and they controlled it from there, and we're in this room servicing those customers, the websites, right? Everybody in the room was as smart as the smartest person in the room, right? Like if you were working for me on a phone with a customer, all you do is put them on hold and ask me a question. I could answer it. So everybody in the room could help my customers, and you didn't have to be out there isolated solving problems and have to have the knowledge. Because again, you'd have the internet, you'd have all these things. You kind of had to be a good employee back then. You had to have a certain set of assets to be able to do that, right? So when I figured out that web work was the best, because you didn't have software revisions, you didn't have update. Back then, updates they'd mail you. You have to mail a disk. It was terrible, right? It just reminds me about mailing a disc. You gotta ask me about the time that I lost an entire law firm's worth of documents, like a massive law firm.
I
Talk
did
about
hear that
stress.
story. Did you
Talk,
ever get it back?
yeah, mostly. But talk about you've talked about how I can handle stress. Like your mom says, I could walk into a building, it's burning, and calmly handle it. That was one of the things that taught me how to handle stress. So
But
I
at Magnusoft, you guys you were like one of the first people to implement putting in credit cards to pay for things online, right?
yeah. So first of all, when I was selling websites, so I was like, well, this is great. I'm gonna start selling websites. And that's when your uncle, he was working for your grandfather. He started working with me to do websites. He liked what I was doing. So I'd go door to door and sell websites. And people like, website? That's just a fad. That's going away. Like they didn't even think it was going to be here. So I was selling websites back then. Then when I said, we can process credit cards, take orders online, great. We'd build a site. People were like, I'm not putting my credit card online. They're going to steal it. And the reality was all the theft was in person. Even today, very, 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 very few people are actually being defrauded in the transit of the credit card information from A to B when you type it in, because it's encrypted. It's either happening where it's stored, which there's laws about how you store it now, but back then there wasn't, or it's when you go to the hotel or the gas station. That's where all the fraud was at. But good luck telling somebody that. They just couldn't get their head around the fact that the internet was a safer way to do transactions.
How did you convince people to buy websites when they thought it was going away?
Well, first of all, your mom was doing all the coding, so we could do a website for $250, $500. Then we'd upsell them from there to the credit card processing. So we would just the pricing mostly, and back then people were doing yellow pages. Yellow pages were very, very expensive. So almost the only way to do business. So they'd spend $1,000 a month, a year, whatever. Like I remember Brian Murray saying, yeah, I have to pay this enormous amount of money. Like if you opened a business, you had to reconcile and overcome rent and then enormous yellow pages ads. So when I said, listen, we can get you business some other way, they would try websites as opposed to some of the yellow page money.
What made you start the website business to begin with?
I don't know. I mean, I used to go to the bookstores to find technologies to do things. There was this product called Cold Fusion. And Cold Fusion is a way you could take data and websites. Back then, HTML was simply static. You'd build a document and you could see it everywhere. And it would have links. That's all HTML in its most basic form is. JavaScript and moving and all the movements and stuff, that's all add-on. Strict HTML back in the day was just documents that were hyperlinked. And that's what they were. It was like a college thing to have shared documents. That's how it started. So Cold Fusion will let you grab data, like say, okay, give me all the names that start with the word M, and then format it into the HTML. So I thought that was interesting. And that was the beginning of content management, where you can manage your own content. You can log in now and change things, and then it republishes. So we were one of the first companies anywhere, even in the USA, that was selling a content management system. And that's where I got into the story I mentioned, where Matt Seeley and I, back then, there's another guy that I partnered with, his name was Matt Seeley, and we started doing just web work. We did $750,000 our first year. And I was one of the first people to use Indians, people from India to do the coding. And people criticized me, buy American. And at the same time, the Ford Rangers were Mazdas, right? So the unions already sold everybody out, but they're looking at me saying, why are you using overseas resources, right? So Oracle was 50%, well, 80% in India. Microsoft was 50% in India. So the only way to compete was to use resources that were cheaper, right? And so I met this guy. His name was Samir Jain. I found out later I was his first customer ever. And he later built such a large company. He was in like the Fortune 100 magazine version in India. And he actually went over and named me as the person that taught him how to do business in the States. That's how long ago I started doing business
And
overseas.
how old you are.
And how old I am. So that's interesting.
But you just would go to like the library. I don't even know. What is it called?
Borders. It was a bookstore. I'd buy
Well,
$200
yeah.
worth of books. Your mom hated it because every time I had an idea, it cost me $200.
I still don't know why you stuck with websites, especially if no one else believed in them at the time.
Because the bigger companies, we were selling to GM. I've sold to every government entity, every Navy, Air Force. I've had websites in every major government area, almost all of the big three, and maybe contractors that hired me to put them there, but they were there because they were our code. It was a lot of it was your mother wrote it. You wouldn't believe it. The thing we never talk about is how much your mom actually grew the business. She did the work. And she was a finisher. Like, she's a detail-oriented person. I'm not. Like, I fix problems. She'd get stuck, I'd fix the problem. I would make it work functionally, but to make it a product that you could use and look good and move good and had the right interface, that was her.
Mm-hmm. And then after Magnusoft, you opened up Website Forge too, right? So what's the difference between the two?
So there was one more interval. During Magnusoft, Pete Cristiano's dad had a contract with the Navy. And Lisa actually wrote a ship store software that was meant to be on the ship stores in Navy. And we made a pretty good chunk of change in that, and also owned part of the company. The company ended up going defunct, but we got paid for that part of the code. And I'll never forget, after that project was done, we got some cold, and your mom and I sat on the couch for a week straight, sick as hell, and she made me watch every one of the North and South series.
I don't know what that is.
It is like this romantic, like all in the old war time. You got to ask your mom. They'd make fun of me. Trust me, no guys watched it. All right, guys don't watch the North and South. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, he's cracking up, making fun of me right now but I was just so sick. But we got our final check, and we sat on a bunch of cash and just sat there and watched all of that. Didn't get off the couch. Little Cassie, your cousin, was running around. We'd watch her. But anyways, so then what happened was there's something called the dot bomb in 90. Was it 8? So where all the technology stocks dropped. Even we had a bunch of mutual funds at the time and some technology, and they all went to nothing. And so nobody was buying websites all of a sudden. So I was like, well, I kind of got burned. I'm like, I was relying on a few big customers, right? And so I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to build something that's more cost effective. It's the same code. Because again, I was good at content management. So I was good at, this is where I had the first store builder, where you built a store for e-commerce and then content. And I sold it for as little as $750 and $50 a month or $35 a month. I think it was $29 the first time. And so I built it called Website Forge on a total whim, total risk, right? I remember being broke. I remember trying to figure out how to tell your mom that I'm not selling anything because they weren't selling. But the concept was many, many customers. So even if I lost a big segment of the customers, I would still have recurring revenue. And that's why I invented a website. And it was so simple. It was like a PayPal link at the time where you just put the code in and just could purchase something. But it grew. And when I finally figured out how to sell, we did really, really well. We were selling 30 to 50 sites a month. Imagine selling 30 to 50 sites per month.
And Mom did all the coding?
No, by then I was using a Russian team. That's where Andy and those guys kicked in.
Are they still with you?
No, because the war, I can't pay anybody in Russia or the Russian-controlled country, including Belarus and all those other countries. And it sounds bad to be like, well, why would you do business in Russia? You got to remember, they did, like he said, Shane, I can't call Putin and tell him not to attack Ukraine. Like, he's not in charge. He was just a vendor of mine that happened to be in Russia. I mean, they came over and stayed at our house. They spent a month every year.
I remember their
in
kids.
The yeah.
It was
Yeah.
fun.
So,
we would go to the Greenfield Village, and
yeah, I feel bad
they
that
couldn't speak English, so we would try and communicate. It was
that's
fun.
right. That's right. And so, yeah, so that was the team we used for that.
And then how did Website Forge evolve over time?
So I guess you got to talk about the sales part of it. So I didn't know how to sell it. Again, there was no sales. So there's a company called Buyer Zone. Buyer Zone had a website where they would advertise with SEO. SEO is where you type in keywords. So if you said, I want a phone system, they'd come up first over the phone system companies, and they'd say, okay, we'll get you 5 companies to call you up to sell you phones. So we did the same thing with websites. So you'd find Buyer Zone as we were learning to do SEO, and they would sell us leads. So I remember making a deal that would cost me about $40,000 for the year. Doesn't sound like a lot, but listen, back then, this is a lot of money. So at least $80,000,
I mean, that
$90,000.
money right now is some people's annual salary.
Well, there you
so
go.
it is a lot of money.
So I'm in a little desk right in downtown Howell, little desk, no furniture. We rented for nothing. Your mom's taking care of you guys at this point, right? And I was like, Lisa, if I pay so much a month, it's gonna be about 40 grand. I'm in for the contract, and they're gonna send me leads. And I'm gonna call them on the phone. I'm gonna sell. And she has a tremendous amount of confidence in me. Always has, right? Especially for sales. If I ever hire somebody for something, she's like, you could do it better. She's always had that very strong confidence in me. And I was nervous because, I've got you guys, so I'm like, it's 40 grand. I mean, it's sink or swim. And she said, do it. So we did it. And then I sucked. I had an 80-90% close rate in person. I had a 0 close rate on the phone. 0. I didn't realize I had no concept of how to sell on the phone. It's a completely different thing. So I worked and worked and worked, and then the leads pile up. So if you have 20 of them and 18 didn't answer, now you got, 18 plus the next 20. So now you got 38 you're calling, and then you got 6. And then how do you manage, like I had no idea. I didn't understand lead systems. I didn't understand call management or call centers. Back then there was call centers. That was a big thing. I was a mess. So I found this guy named Doug Marks who used to sell radio ad space. He was a very good salesperson. He was a phone guy. And I made a deal with him. I gave him 10% commission if he could sell, right? But the problem was he still couldn't keep up with the no-shows, the people that wouldn't answer. So I was one of the first people that created a sales process and automation. So I had 6 emails I sent over 12 days. We never called anybody. We stopped. We only sent these emails out, and we only engaged in who replied, right? And then when we replied, we'd call them, right? Or he would do 1 call, but that was it. We weren't chasing because it's just you couldn't do it. There's enough time in the day. So maybe 5% would respond via email, and we would close half of the 5%. So what I did was I did the math and made sure that on that 2.5%, we could make enough money. So I was only selling 2.5% of the 100% of leads, but I wasn't killing labor and time paying people to chase those leads. And Doug was good on the phone. And I stopped. I didn't sell. I was just managing at that point. The team, that's Kevin Ledesma was working for me, and we had a whole team. So we were managing it, and so I was just making sure they got built. And we were doing 30 to 50 websites a month. Now they weren't expensive; they were 500, 700, 1,500, But to me, it was amazing.
And the recurring revenue.
Recurring revenue is where it's at. Yeah.
And after with Website Forge, how did that evolve over time? Because even now, it's not your main source of revenue, is it? Or is it? I don't know.
Currently, I think our biggest financial gross sales is TKD score, but it's got a low margin. Magnus and Website Forge.
Well, I guess let's pause for a second. So at Website Forge, since then, how many businesses have you created?
We've got 6. One's technically not mine, but I helped Peter market. So we've got
but it's Mom's, so
Mom's,
it
yeah.
is yours.
Yeah, 2 web companies, Print Shop, Mission Impossible Printing, TKD Score, Storm Taekwondo, which Megan's mostly managing right now, is growing, and then Peter's got Merem Blasting. So I'm marketing or helping in one way, shape, or form for those companies.
And which one is your AI robot associated with?
The AI stuff, I have running it all, but I tie that to Website Forge.
Repeat that.
I use AI in all those companies, but I tie the development.
Sales. Aren't you selling it to other people right now?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And then so Website Forge, Magnusoft, Mission Impossible Printing, Storm Taekwondo, TKD Score, and then Merem Blasting.
Right.
And I mean, for the first 10, no, not even. You probably did Magnusoft and Website Forge for about 5 to 7 years before.
We were grossing over $1 million with those 2 companies at the pinnacle.
Oh wow! And then when did you start the next one? Was it TKD Score that comes next?
Kind of, because you guys were in Taekwondo and we were in Taekwondo, and the dado came out, we wanted to be competitive. We kind of bought some dado and kind of turned that into a rental thing because there was nobody in the Midwest. We brought dado to the Midwest. Nobody was really using it except for Russ Gale. Actually, would import a gear from Canada that would bring it, but there was no dado on our part of the country until we started bringing it.
And why did you decide to get into that business?
We already bought it. We figured we might as well rent to pay it off. It really was
But
just
why'd you buy it?
because we wanted you guys to be able to use it to go to nationals. Because that was how you competed. So we didn't know how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the cash. We had a lot of money back then. So we just bought it.
How old were we when you started it? It's all a blur to me.
I got to look at the videos. Peter was a youth, so he had to be under 11. He was probably 8, 9. So you were probably 10.
And what got you into Taekwondo in the first place?
So remember I snapped my ACL on the dirt bike?
Not really.
So I snapped my ACL. I never was into lifting weights. I took a little bit of karate when I was a kid, some Shotokan to like a blue belt. And I don't feel like working out is working out when I'm doing martial arts or things like that, right? So I couldn't finish getting my legs straightened out. It wouldn't finish rehabbing. It was really tight. They used a cadaver ACL and it just was really strong. And I couldn't get the bend and I couldn't get it straightened out. So I was like, well, if I go do, I always want to do Aikido actually. And I couldn't find a place. So I went and tried out a Taekwondo there in Howell and I loved it. And I was like, Lisa, you might like this, you know? And she had just had Megan, so she wanted to kind of get back into shape or whatever. So she started. And I was thinking Mom wouldn't like it because, you know, she's fairly reserved. She was savage. She was the best student in there, forms and everything. Best cardio, best at everything we did, and loved it. She was like in her prime. Broke a lot of bones. She broke her feet on people and stuff. She went hard. But we had fun. We had a ball. And then that was our family thing. We'd go shooting or we'd go Taekwondo. Best wife ever. Right? Like how much happier can you be as a guy that your wife likes to do all those things?
When did I start Taekwondo? Was I 4 or 5?
You were probably 5 because Peter was 4. And Megan didn't even start right away till a little bit after that. She was
because she's 4.5 years younger than me.
Right.
So that makes sense.
Right. And she was so small.
And then how did we get in the competitions?
We just went. When I had my hips replaced, because the thing is as I got my black belt, the day after, or the Monday after I got my black belt, which was Saturday, I had my first hip replacement. That's why I couldn't really be real hyper competitive. You know, like I was limping and in pain all that time. And so when I was in the walker, my instructor allowed me to help with class, and I took an interest in you guys sparring well, so I'd take the sparring group, and when you guys got good, I would have the other kids go against you and try to get you. And I started giving kids a quarter for a head kick, and you know, all the kids, not just you guys. I just would incentivize the little kids to be more competitive in class. And I just started learning how to read this, that, you know, what was going on, and just we did okay then. I didn't have any real tactics at the time, but it was more just energizing the kids to try things, do things, and be athletic. And I just became the coach, and he trusted me to coach the team. He didn't really want to go out on Saturdays anyways. He liked to go home. So I started going out with the team. I just became the team coach.
Going out, like taking us to
tournaments. Yeah. Yep.
I know that they had a lot of tournaments set up. Like there was, I don't really know because I was so young, but there's like how many different masters or Taekwondo masters, they would all run their own tournament every year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And were they in like the Olympic circuit? Back then they used to do the scoring on paper. Like if I kicked someone, if they thought it was hard enough, they'd give me a little tally.
The only person that was even near that level as a instructor was Master Shin. Master Shin was in the 88 Olympic camp, and went to team trials and just narrowly missed the spot. Trying to think of all those guys. In the Michigan though he was, don't realize it, but he's one of the most decorated guys. But all of them had, great competition careers. The Roses were really well known, and they had really put a lot of competition in the state. Coverts, have been around forever, and they had really good tournaments. And so there were key people there that were really good at promoting and encouraging the sport.
And Master Muhammad.
And and then
was he in the
later
Olympic
Russ Gale.
circuit?
No, Master Muhammad came from Morocco, and he loved to fight. So he would drive himself everywhere. He even fought as an older guy. He's got crazy stories. Oh, and Master Southwick, he was there. He actually trained with Master Muhammad when he came to MSU. And I don't know all the stories, so if I get it wrong, but I mean, I hear some cool stuff. Mm-hmm. They said that Master Muhammad, they used to have just a simple weight machine, one of those just the machines that you just had the frame. And he said he would just put every single weight on it and lift it, just every weight it had. you know. And Master Southwell said he'd just look at him because and it's not really how you're supposed to weight train, right? That's actually dangerous. But just there's a lot of crazy stories
But he's
about that.
wicked strong, so
He's wicked strong,
he
yeah.
picked it up like it was probably nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And he said when he came to the States, his goal was to fight everybody in this category.
Oh wow.
Master Paul Rose was his first adult match was against Muhammad, and they asked him what was his best kick, and he said his punch. There's a lot of cool things. There's a lot of cool people in the state that helped it develop.
Yeah, but I mean, you've taken several athletes to like the Olympic level, close to it. Not the Olympic level, but like the world level. I started when we were 5.
Mhm.
How long did we train with Master Neff before we left? I'm trying to remember.
So here's the progression. We were with Master Neff. He got to the point where he came to a life crisis and decided to
We were
move.
in school when I was 15,
Right. But here's what happened.
so it's 10 years.
He wanted to sell the school to me because he wanted to leave. He had like a midlife crisis, okay? And at the time, I was like, there's not enough money in it. Like, it's not, I like Taekwondo, but I don't want to own a school, right? And I didn't really know especially the way he ran it. You know, I didn't really want that school. So he ended up selling it to another person that was there that I'd actually trained since she got there, and she really wanted to have a school. So he sold it to her, and he left. And then I eventually, stopped. And then just after I stopped, Kevin was training, and he got his black belt at a place. And then he decided to go do MMA. I don't know, for some reason he quit training. That place thinks I stopped him from training. It's a crazy story, but actually he stopped all by himself. He was over there at SFS doing MMA, loved it, right? And at the time I was actually helping at SFS, helping James with some kid program, and then I got to roll. He let me roll with the guys, so I was doing jujitsu and stuff like that, rehabbing my hip basically, right? Because I was fighting at the point. I got to the point I could fight again back then, and so after all that, Kevin was like, "You want to go to lunch?" I'm like, "Yeah," but this guy called me, says he's got a bunch of gear he wants to sell me. He's got a school in commerce, and he just wants to sell these closing the doors. He goes, "Well, I'll meet you there, and then we'll go to lunch." So we sit down and hear this guy's story. And this guy's like, yeah, I just can't keep any students and this and that. And I'm looking, the place is gorgeous. Beautiful mats, stocked room, the office has all kinds of gear, monitors on the wall. And I'm looking around. I literally, while the guy was talking to me, I started Googling to see if he had like a sex scandal or something, that he did something wrong, why he lost all his students. Like, I could not understand how a school in this spot could not have students. And Kevin, obviously being the business guy he is, picked up on the same thing. And I couldn't believe it. So we leave there, and Kevin's like, "We got to buy the school." And I'm like, "We're not buying the school. I don't want to run a school. I don't, it's just a big mess." He goes, "If you run the program, I'll do the finances. Because I'll run the business side, you run all you got to do is show up and teach." And I said, no, and no. And he finally convinced me. And I said, "Okay." I said, "But it can't cost us more than $5,000. He's like, "Done." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Done. I'll do it." I said, "And we're going to take over the existing lease. We're not signing a new lease." I was trying to tank it, right? I was trying to nobody does it. Nobody takes everything in the room for $5,000, right? And no company accepts a lease takeover, just same lease with a different name. It just doesn't happen. He got it all done. So I was like, fuck, right? I remember how nervous I was to run it, believe it or not. All the teaching I did, it was strange, but we did it. And then we started Storm in commerce, killed it, put 200 people in there in 4.5 months. It was a record for the guy that helped me market it. I don't know if you've seen it since. I doubt it. And the rest was history. And then we sold it at COVID because, again, I had other companies worth more money in terms of revenue. And I knew it'd be 2 years. I even told everybody, it's going to be 2 years before we're doing anything, and we're going to be paying rent for all that time because we don't want to screw over the landlord. Everybody else was just stopping their paying. We paid the guy up until it got sold, and then we made a new deal. They made a new deal, but we made sure he got paid. And then now with the new Storm is because Russ Gale sold his interest out of his school and kind of felt like he was lost and didn't have something to do. And he liked Taekwondo, and he's really good at it. Produced lots of national team members and things. And his general reason for wanting me to be involved is because we developed athletes that had really strong mentalities and mindsets and grit, and also could fight quite well. Our fundamentals were super strong. We were, again, we had some athletes that were fighting at the world level. You as well. You were doing great. So it just kind of all came together.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's pretty cool. And then it kind of made sense that Mission and TKD Score went alongside having the studio, right?
Yeah.
Because we could use the gear to train, and we would run tournaments occasionally,
Mm-hmm.
sell gear on demand. We
Yep.
even still do that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I used to go and run those events myself,
Yep.
but
You were awesome. You used to drive with the truck and trailer. You'd be driving 50 feet long from DC, driving the truck and trailer, backing it up. You'd pull in the gas station and people couldn't believe it. They would try to tell you how to drive. Remember that?
yeah. That was in Chicago.
The Chicago, yeah, yeah. No, you did a lot.
That was a brutal one.
That was after collegiates.
That one was one I had run on my own.
Oh.
That in DC, that was collegiates.
That's right. That was when you were 12. They had a collegiate tournament.
No, because I was driving for that one.
Well, it was a different one.
We went multiple times.
But the one I remember is you were 12 years old. We went to a collegiate tournament. We enrolled you against the 18-year-old and up athletes. You won in forms and you won in sparring, and they were so pissed. And you look like a little itty bitty kid next to these athletes, and they were so mad on the podium. We'll never forget that picture. And then they had a second tournament in the same place for little guys, and Megan lined up, and she got for her. They put her in the group of people her size, and I said no, and he moved to the next line. I said no, and they moved to he's like, this line. They were like a head and a half taller. And I'm like, that line. Not 1 point scored on her. She ripped through them all. It was so fun. You guys
Well, they thought we were cheating because we owned the scoring system.
Yeah, they thought we were gaming the system because nobody knew what dado was at the time. Yeah. Megan had to go back and let them kick it on her just so they could see how to score a point. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was so mad because, it hurt because she had to stand there and get kicked.
Well, yeah, it's a lot different than like the tally.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would have 3 coaches and you would just write lines.
3 routes,
and then at the end
yeah.
you would combine them, and as long as there's 2 lines for every kick.
Yep.
You would get a point.
Yeah, we could talk a lot of stories about you guys doing tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, my whole childhood we did Taekwondo, but there was definitely certain parts or times where I hated it.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah, Peter too, Megan too.
But I love the competition and the people that
Right.
we met. I mean, across the country, we just know so many people now just because of Taekwondo.
Oh, yeah. And they still ask about you.
And I have no idea why you continue doing it, like, for all those years, especially because while you were doing Taekwondo, like, you started it because you tore your ACL, but while doing Taekwondo, you had 2 entire hip replacements.
It's the coaching. I just love the kids. I like watching a young person develop and just really become proud of themselves. Overcoming fears. If you can learn how to overcome fears and create a grittier, savage mentality as a young person, especially before puberty, because fears sink in, and all the things that you see sink in when that happens. It galvanizes it. I think if you can get that habit ahead of time as you develop into an adult, I think it just makes you much less risk averse. I think you worry less about what people think about you. I think you're, again, willing to take risks. I mean, life is about failures. You fail and fail until there's no other way to fail, and then you can start winning, right? Succeeding. So I just like seeing that happen. And we've had some people that you never would have thought could do certain things become extremely mentally strong and do some really, really cool things. And then when we sold Storm, when we went over to Limitless, and I said, listen, I just have a few people that I want to train. What do you want to charge me, or what do you want to do? I'll hide. She's like, we don't do a ton of sparring here, but if you take some kids that I recommend and train them as well, you can have the space. So then we took that team, and it became very popular, one of the best teams in the whole region, right? So I developed a habit of being able to take teams and give them a fundamental base, no matter what their skill, because not everybody's going to be, everybody's different, right? You just want their maximal potential. But I was able to get the maximum potential out of these athletes, and they did really well statistically at the tournaments. I mean, I don't really do medal counts when I post all the highlights, but the truth is we're like 90% success rate in terms of winning matches at the local level.
What do you think it is that as a coach you're teaching these kids that allows them to succeed at whatever level they're at?
I think it's twofold. I said, first of all, you have to teach them the things that win. And a lot of people are stuck in the old school way of doing things. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the U.S. Academy and what the coaches are doing there and what the people that are winning are doing, it's not, it's easy. It's easy to teach the old school. It's easy just to, make them fast and look cool in your own school. But if you're going to go to the competitive level, you have to understand the game is different. So we understand the game is different, number one. But again, no matter your skill level, people generally falter as they get to the higher levels because of the mentality and and losing and the fear of losing. And there's a whole lot of factors I could go on and on about, but we got to fight.
Well, we'll have to actually save that for next
Yeah,
time because that's I think a great stopping point.
Yeah. So there's a lot to it, but again, mental is, I would argue, more important. I mean, you can see science says grit almost always wins, but you have to be fighting the right way. That's the key. And most people aren't. It's easier to teach the old school. That's the answer. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, the kids are happy and they feel good, but they're not going to win.
Well, old school isn't sport.
Right. It's not the current sport.
It's not the Olympic sport.
Right.
Which is a lot different.
Correct.
But yeah, well, thanks for joining me again.
I love it.
This was fun.
Thank you. What's your sign off? We got to go with sign off. All right. This is Melly signing off.
My name's Melissa.
Okay. All right.
Melissa signing off.
There you go. There it is. That was it.
That's so bad.